B. The beginning begins by showing a girl trying to escape from two psychopathic men hunting her. They covered her mouth and tied her hands, letting her run through the woods while they hunted her like predators full of desire to kill their prey. Meanwhile, in another place, a man is watching the hunt for that girl through the camera's monitor screen connected to his two friends. He looked so excited and enjoyed the moment when she was frightened and helpless under the torture. However, when the two psychopathic men were about to kill their victims, suddenly, something attacked them. The man who was monitoring in the car looked confused because the camera suddenly malfunctioned and showed a strange image. On the other hand, a red-haired man was seen monitoring the actions of the three men from a distance. However, it is not yet clear what his intentions and purposes are for them. The next day, in a monarchical country called Cremona, a young man named Koku is seen heading to his workplace, a music store specializing in the repairs and handcraft of violins called Stella del Mattino. He works as a violin craftsman, helping the shop owner, Yukio Hoshina. Upon arrival, Koku met the shop owner's daughter, Lily Hoshina, who seemed to be in a hurry to leave. She rushed into her car and drove to the crime scene in the middle of the forest. Lily, a detective at the Royal Investigative Services, RIS, is investigating the murder that occurred last night, the victims of which are none other than the two psychopaths who appear at the beginning of the story. With her leader, a male inspector named Boris Mayer, she conducted an investigation and found a mark of Killer Bee carved into the tree. After staring at it and thinking for a while, Lily hears some nearby cops telling a mysterious man to leave the crime scene. She then turns her attention to him and tries to tell him to leave. However, he continues staring at the black feathers on the ground. Shortly afterward, Boris comes up and happily greets someone named Keith Kazama Flick, but addressing him as Genie. Later, at RIS headquarters, everyone seemed surprised by the return of Keith Kazama Flick, one of the most reliable detectives in RIS who retired several years ago after the death of his sister, who was brutally murdered. That day, Keith was called out of retirement to help the RIS Criminal Investigation Force track down the serial murderer, Killer Bee. The RIS Investigation Force has managed to get information about the two psychopathic men who were killed last night and are looking for a man named Julian Krause, their colleague who disappeared after the incident. In addition, Lily and her team are also investigating Killer Bee, the serial murderer who is killing other criminals while leaving a mark that looks like Bee and some slashes next to it. Meanwhile, in an abandoned hut deep in the forest, Julian Krause, who was hiding, looks furious when he finds out that his two friends were killed by a mysterious figure named Killer Bee. Not long after, suddenly, a red-haired man appeared who had previously been supervising their action. He turned out to be Quinn, a member of Market Maker, a mysterious organization that controls Cremona from the shadows of society. Knowing that Julian is furious and wants to take revenge on Killer Bee, Quinn also says that he will help Julian get his revenge, as long as he is willing to do something that can attract the killer's attention, which is stealing an experimental infantry fighting vehicle. Without thinking, Julian immediately agreed to it. The next day, Quinn and Julian infiltrated the IFV transport on the Aqua line, then used its cannon to shoot their way out of the transport from inside. After a spectacularly violent shooting spree, Quinn activated the IFV stealth capabilities to lose the police pursuit as he drove into a tunnel. On the other side, Keith is seen meeting his old friend, Gilbert Ross, the head forensics coroner at the Royal Investigative Service. Gilbert then brought up the case of the murder of Keith's sister, Erica, and asked if he had managed to find out who had killed her. Keith stated that he had obtained important clues regarding the person who had killed his sister but still had a few things to confirm before catching the person. After successfully escaping from police pursuit, Quinn and Julian enter a tunnel, where Quinn then asks his teammates to take care of the tank while he takes Julian to the train. Meanwhile, at the RIS headquarters, they looked confused when Keith wrote something on the blackboard. He measured and calculated the distance and estimated the possible paths the robbers might take in their chances of escaping from the police hunt. While everyone seemed confused about what Keith was doing, a senior police officer named Richard, who had known him for a long time, felt sure that he could find the escape route the robbers used, maybe even their hiding place. On the other hand, Killer Bee apparently managed to track down Quinn and Julian and confront them on the train. However, when Julian was about to attack Killer Bee to avenge him, Quinn instead killed him and told the leader of the Market Maker, a man named Minatsuki, that Killer Bee had appeared. Minatsuki and the members of Market Maker weren't actually normal humans but experimental superhumans called Regis. Apart from provoking the appearance of the Killer Bee they have been eyeing for so long, all the fuss going on in town over Quinn stealing a newly developed military IFV become a distraction. It makes the rest of the Market Makers can easily steal Moby Dick, a wartime airship that was being kept in the Aviation Museum. From a distance, Minatsuki and a girl named Yuna are monitoring the fierce battle between Quinn and Killer Bee. After Killer Bee showed his true character, with 2 black wings sprouting from his back and his left arm, which turns into blue steel on command, Quinn immediately knew that Killer Bee was the Black Wing King he had been looking for all along. In his true form, Killer Bee was not a match for Quinn, so he was eventually killed by him. On the other hand, Lily and Boris rushed to the location Keith pointed out and managed to find the IFV that had been left alone. After that, they realized that the theft was really just a distraction. A few days later, in an experimental lab room whose location is unknown, a man is seen being locked up in a cell filled with poison gas. He finally died in a horrific situation, and the incident was witnessed firsthand by a member of the market maker named Izanami. The scene then switches and shows Koku playing the violin in front of the shop owner and his son, Kai, who is very impressed with his abilities. Although Koku has a quiet and friendly personality and seems like a weak young man, in reality, he is actually the mysterious Killer Bee, chased down by the elusive market maker and the RIS. He seems to be on the search for someone but can't fully remember who or what happened to him. Meanwhile, in another place, Lily and the RIS investigation force were seen investigating the murder case of the assemblyman, Ed Kyle. He was caught in a corruption case and found the marking of Killer Bees at the crime scene. But Keith thinks it's not Killer Bee. They then find the body of the man who was previously killed with poison gas, in which a mysterious box is in his hand. Keith and Eric also assume that whoever killed Ed Kyle and the man must be someone who is also involved in the IFV theft. However, the RIS investigation force still doesn't know their real purpose. After performing an autopsy on the man, Gilbert told Keith that he died from a poison that damaged all his organs, so he died in a very painful way. After opening the box in the man's hand, the RIS investigation force found an invitation letter to attend a charity ball event organized by the mayor. The box was also found in a deadly poison gas, which they assumed would be a poison gas attack at the charity party. Upon learning that, Eric also sent several members of the RIS investigation force to infiltrate the charity party to secure the situation and thwart the attack. Meanwhile, in the building that will be used as the location of a charity party, several people are planting explosives filled with poison gas that is enough to kill all invited guests who attend the party. On the other hand, Koku looks surprised to hear radio broadcasts reporting on the murder of the assemblyman by Killer Bee, even though he didn't kill the man at all. He then intentionally injures his hand to ask permission to go home early. At a charity party, Lily and her partners, Brian and Mario, were seen disguised as invited guests at the charity party, while the rest of the team was scouring every floor in the building to find something suspicious, which was suspected to be a device that would release poison gas. Meanwhile, Keith and Boris will be guarding the main entrance of the building. At the same time, Eric and a woman named Kayla monitor the movements of all invited guests from the RIS headquarters with the most sophisticated computer system that can detect someone's movements if they do something suspicious. Inside the building, Koku was already disguised as a waiter, where he later met Izanami, who asked him to come to the roof of the building because he wanted to tell Koku something important that he had been looking for. Not long after, Kayla told Lily and her partners that there was a blonde-haired man whose movements were quite suspicious as he walked straight towards the mayor and was about to attack him. Hearing this, Lily and her partners rushed to the mayor. Sure enough, the man almost killed the mayor, but Mario thwarted his action and immediately knocked him down. Instead of feeling scared and giving up, the blonde man laughed as if he had anticipated what Mario would do to him. Therefore, he signaled his partner, a man named Blue, to carry out their next plan. Not long after, all the lights suddenly went out, and all access doors to the exit from the building were closed completely. The man then reveals that they've rigged the building with poison gas, which is not only enough to kill everyone in the building but also enough to kill everyone in the city. The blonde-haired man then showed what would happen to them if they inhaled the poison gas and told everyone that the only way to get out of there and be free from the threat of poison gas was to kill the mayor. Meanwhile, on the roof of the building, Koku gets into a fierce fight with Izanami, which then makes him purposely lure Koku to leave and follow him. When Kayla is trying to take over the building's security system from Blue, Keith notices the fight between Koku and Izanami and decides to go after them. Long story short, after Izanami informed Minatsuki that they had succeeded in luring Koku, he ordered one of his henchmen to kill Blue because they were no longer needed. Because of that, Kayla managed to take over the building's security system and reopened access to all exits in the building. When everyone was trying to escape from the building, suddenly Minatsuki activated a device that sprayed poison gas throughout the room and made several people still in there collapsed unconscious, including Lily. Seeing this, Eric immediately ordered Kayla to open the airways so that the poisonous gas was sucked back into the airways. On the other hand, Keith, still chasing Koku and Izanami, tells Eric that the poison gas is just a bluff, not the deadly poison gas they found earlier. He firmly believes that the mastermind behind this terrorist act is the Market Maker organization, which will do everything they can to lure out Killer B, a mysterious figure who has been their target all along. Meanwhile, in another place, Koku and Izanami are still engaged in a fierce battle at a lake and talk a bit more about the missing person Koku wants to find but can't remember. Izanami then reveals that his left leg has the same ability as Koku's left arm to turn into a sword. After a fight, he can defeat Izanami. Izanami then requests Koku to take his leg as it will be useful to him in the future and to touch Canopus. When Keith and Boris arrive at the lake, Koku and Izanami's bodies can no longer be found. Back to the location of the charity party, which had been secured by the police, medical officers were immediately dispatched to help the victims of the poison gas who fainted, including Lily. While combing the underground area, the police found the two skinned bodies of the alleged perpetrators and a mysterious wooden box containing the actual deadly poison gas. The next day, Keith woke up from a nightmare about the death of his beloved sister, who was brutally murdered several years ago, which still haunts him because, to this day, he hasn't caught the real killer yet. After going to the library and shopping for groceries, Keith then returned to his apartment, where he was surprised by the presence of Lily, who was already at his apartment door. He immediately shooed her away, but she forced her way in to talk about the mysterious Killer B, the serial murderer who only targets criminals as his victims. But then, Lily and Keith get involved in a small incident that causes Boris, who is also about to visit Keith's apartment, to be misunderstood and think that he had done something indecent to her. Boris then broke down the door to Keith's apartment, intending to save Lily, but it turned out to be all a misunderstanding. Not long after, Kayla also came there, followed by Mario and Eric, then had a party at Keith's apartment at Boris' invitation. When Keith was alone on the balcony for a breath of fresh air, Boris then approached him. Boris mentioned how similar Lily was to Erica, Keith's beloved sister, where he had realized from the start that Keith was deliberately keeping his distance from Lily because she was very similar to the woman he loved so much. However, Keith denied that Lily was similar to his sister because, according to him, Lily was a careless girl and often endangered herself. After that, Boris contacted Brian because he had not yet arrived at Keith's apartment. Brian told him that he had just finished his work at the office and was about to head there. However, when he was about to head to the parking area on the bottom floor, he was brutally attacked by someone in the elevator. Knowing that their mate had been the victim of the Killer B attack because there was the letter B symbol near the victim, Boris and the others immediately started an investigation. Luckily, Brian was taken to the hospital immediately, so his life was saved, although he is still in critical condition. Boris and Eric find out that the CCTV camera has been tampered with before, so they suspect the attack on Brian was pre-planned, and most likely, the culprit is someone who works at RIS headquarters. While the others are investigating the crime scene, Keith and Lily are in the hospital to observe Brian's condition until he is confirmed to have passed his critical period and his condition is starting to recover. The doctor who treated Brian then approached Keith and gave Brian's watch to him. The doctor said that Brian asked him to give the watch to Keith before he lost consciousness. On the other hand, a man named Kamui, a member of Market Maker, seems to have difficulty stemming his murderous urges and is mentally unstable because he has not injected the gold ampule into his body. Kamui enters a narrow alley, where he is then ganged up by a gang of thugs about to rob him. However, because he gradually lost control, he killed the thugs because they dropped the only gold ampule he had. Not long after, another member of the Market Maker, a man named Leica, arrived there and helped Kamui by injecting the gold ampule into him. Two policemen then came to the place to check the situation. Still, Leica quickly showed the Market Maker symbol on his palm to the policemen, and instantly they were respectful towards him as if he was their leader. That night, a hooded man entered Brian's treatment room and was about to kill him. However, Keith, who turned out to be hiding there, immediately stopped the person and revealed the identity of the person, who was none other than Richard, a senior police officer in the RIS investigation force. Keith was able to figure out his identity thanks to the clues Brian had left on his watch. Richard was the one who had attacked Brian in the elevator and left a B sign to mislead the police investigation. Richard finally unmasked and taunted Keith by saying that he was the one who had killed his sister. However, he did not necessarily believe it. Before Keith could get any information, Richard had pointed the blade at his neck instead, intended to kill himself, and blamed Keith as the one who attacked Brian and killed him. Realizing that Richard might have set him up from the start, Keith immediately rushed out of there. After that, Keith meets with Koku, asking him if Keith is a Canopus. Unexpectedly, Keith knows him, even knowing that he is the figure behind Killer B. Keith tells Koku that the B symbol left by him is not actually the letter B, but the number 13, and the 4 slashes behind the symbol actually indicate the number 4 in the numeral romance, which turns out to be referring to Yuna, a member of the market maker. With the number 13, which is Koku's trademark, and 4 slashes that signify Yuna, Koku leaves these clues every time he kills his target so that Yuna can know that he is still alive because the symbol is a special symbol between them. He then asks Keith to tell him where Yuna is, but Keith asks him to meet at a temple tomorrow night. On the other hand, Lily and the RIS investigation force investigate the case of Richard's murder and suspect that the culprit is Keith. Because of that, they chose Keith as a suspect and searched for his whereabouts all over the country. Meanwhile, at Market Maker's headquarters, Yuna is already preparing to face Koku as ordered and promises Minatsuki that she will kill him or the Black-Winged King. On the following night, as agreed, Keith was waiting for Koku at the temple, where he told him about the 13-winged human skeleton fossils found in the wreckage of the jet black inscription located on top of the mountains. The scientists identified winged skeletons as progenitors of humanity and were essentially gods. Thus, the project to resurrect these gods began. Since the king and government realized this project could have monetary value, they gathered donations under the pretext of resurrecting these gods. They built the Jala Blanca Royal Scientific Institute, where many of the top researchers gathered to work on resurrecting the gods. However, some of the researchers were blinded by the money. They became corrupt, wasting days on different projects, specifically the inbreeding program which produced malformed, insane offspring called the Promising Ones. These were created again and again over the centuries. And when rumors that the program would be shut down, one of the researchers proposed to the king to develop a program that would balance the kingdom's fear and tranquility inside and outside the kingdom. Thus, the Promising Ones became part of an elite government agency to maintain order and chaos, known now as Market Maker. One of the scientists involved in the Ancient Gods Revival project is Heath Kazama Flick, Keith's father, who is also Canopus. However, in the middle of Keith and Koku's conversation, someone in a mask suddenly attacked them. A fierce battle ensued between Koku and the masked figure, where that person could match Koku's speed and strength. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Minatsuki was seen watching their fight, which indicated that the masked figure was none other than Yuna. The battle was so fierce that the temple was finally destroyed and collapsed. Koku looks very surprised when he finds out that the person who attacked him is Yuna, but she doesn't seem to remember him because she looks at him with hatred. Koku was reminiscing about his past with Yuna, whom they used to be best friends and were very close to each other. Because of that, he was silent when she stabbed him. Seeing Koku, who seemed resigned to her attack, Yuna finally woke up and began to reminisce about her past with him. But then, Minatsuki arrived there and immediately stabbed her in front of Koku, who turned into the Black-Winged King after seeing Yuna being hurt. After Minatsuki took Yuna away, he ordered the twins, Takeru and Kukuri, and Kamui to kill Koku. He also ordered Leica, who was in Moby Dick, to drop the spear from above, which then incapacitated Koku. When Minatsuki was about to leave with his henchmen, suddenly Keith appeared and immediately fired a bullet which turned out to be able to injure him. So far, Minatsuki and the Market Maker members are known to be immune to bullets. They managed to escape while Keith rushed to help Koku. The scene then switches to the past, where Keith's father, Heath, is still a genetic researcher at the Jala Blanca Royal Scientific Research Institute. Heath acts like a father to them. During one incident, he encouraged a depressed Koku about being weak, saying that there are other forms of strength besides power and that he'll understand one day. Not wanting to make Koku his weapons, Heath took over as caretaker for him and taught him how to properly use his powers. Besides Heath caring for him like a father, Koku also has Yuna as his best friend. They promise to protect each other and carve certain symbols that signify their characteristics. One night, a group of people attacked the Jala Blanca Research Institute, causing trouble there. Knowing that the attack must have targeted Koku, Heath ordered a boy named Kirisame to find and take him to a safe place. During the ambush, Yuna sits in the corner of the room while writing symbols of herself and Koku, hoping that he will come to save her. Not long after, Minatsuki came up to Yuna, saying that Koku was waiting for her somewhere. He told her to hurry away from there. Meanwhile, Izanami seemed to be waiting for them by the door while observing them. When the chaos had spread to almost the entire Jala Blanca Research Institute, Koku and Kirisame managed to escape into the middle of the forest to escape the chaos. But in the middle of the run, Koku was worried about Yuna and occasionally looked at the burning building. Meanwhile, inside the building, Heath meets with Minatsuki and Izanami and tells them to get out of there immediately. But then, a group of armed men calling themselves the Market Makers confronts them, where their purpose of coming there is to take Minatsuki, whose existence could stabilize the Regas. While Heath getting the children to a safer place, Minatsuki surprises him by literally stabbing him in the back, causing him to collapse. Minatsuki claims he won't be treated as Koku's spare parts, and demands Koku's location, even when Heath begs him not to be conned by the Market Maker leader. In another place, Koku and Kirisame finally arrive at their hideout in the middle of the forest. However, the Market Maker members also managed to track their whereabouts, so Kirisame forced Koku to enter the shelter and lock it while he and the other children tried to dispel the Market Maker members who wanted to catch him. When Koku finally leaves the tree shelter, he is shocked to find that Kirisame and all his friends are dead. He rushes back to the institute, where he sees the mark Yuna left for him on the blackboard, and feels very guilty for not being able to save her. Shortly afterward, he finds Heath dying from his wounds from Minatsuki. Heath then suggests Koku go and explains that he can resonate with Yuna and must find her and protect her at all costs. With the instructions, Koku returns to his dead friends and begins to see off Kirisame's arm, resulting in his own arm. Back to the present time, Koku finally wakes up and realizes that Keith has treated his wounds from the previous fight. He then asks Keith to check the old records left by Keith's father, where Heath once told him that Keith would show him the way in the future. Meanwhile, at the RIS headquarters, Minatsuki seems to be asking Eric about Keith's whereabouts. As the leader of Market Maker, who got backed by the government from behind, Minatsuki appears to have quite a bit of influence over the police, even those of high rank like Eric. He then urged Eric to mobilize all members of the RIS investigation force to find Keith's whereabouts as soon as possible. Even though they don't fully believe that Keith is the one who killed Richard and attacked Brian, Boris and Lily still carry out Eric's orders to search Keith's apartment for clues to the man's whereabouts. That night, Keith asks Koku about dead Kyle, the suspect man in the murder of Keith's sister, who died mysteriously before a court decision was made. Koku then tells Keith that Kyle is a Reggie who works for the Market Maker, and it's very likely that Kyle did know the real killer and was deliberately protecting that person. Koku also reveals that he was the one who killed Kyle, as he was involved in the Market Maker attack that killed Keith's father and the others. After knowing this fact, Keith then contacted Eric and informed him that his predictions about Kyle were true, whereas he, from the start, had refused to believe that Kyle was the one who killed Erica. Eric asks Keith to come back and solve this problem together, but Keith refused and was determined to uncover the truth about the murder of his beloved sister with his own hands. The next day, Lily, who stayed the night at Keith's apartment to decode the numbers and symbols in his room, finally managed to find out that the codes formed a face of a bespectacled woman who looked very much like her. She then asks Boris the woman's identity and learns that the woman is Erica, Keith's younger sister, who was viciously murdered several years ago. Boris then revealed that the reason Keith deliberately stayed away from Lily was because she was very similar to Erica. Upon arrival at the RIS headquarters, Lily immediately felt angry when Eric suddenly fired her for no apparent reason. Without Lily knowing, it turns out that Eric and Boris have planned something to take advantage of her high curiosity to find Keith's whereabouts first and the Market Maker to protect him. Boris has planted a tracker on Lily, so Kayla can know her movements anytime and anywhere. Having a pretty good memory and a fairly sensitive sense of taste, Lily finally knows the location of Keith's existence in a small town that is famous for having dishes with a very distinctive taste. In another place, Keith and Koku are seen having dinner at a restaurant, where they then talk about Yuna and Moby Dick hiding under the stars. Not long after, Lily finally arrived there and was very surprised to see the existence of Koku with Keith. Not wanting to involve Lily, Keith lied by saying that Koku was his younger brother. However, she didn't immediately believe his words and confronted him that he was deliberately avoiding her because her face closely resembled his sister. Unbeknownst to Keith and Koku, one of the Market Maker, a boy named Takeru, managed to find out where they were and immediately launched a barrage of attacks on Keith's caravan. Keith immediately rushed to protect Lily, while Koku changed to his true form right in front of her. She was very surprised to see the drastic change in him, who was quite scary, like a monster. But she didn't want to assume first and intended to investigate the connection between them, which might refer to the true identity of Killer B. A few days later, Keith finally turns to the police and tells Eric that Richard deliberately killed himself to frame him. He also reveals that Gilbert was most likely involved in Erica's murder because Kyle had been treated at the hospital where Gilbert worked. Erica's body was also autopsied there. He had apparently tapped the pack of cigarettes he had given Gilbert and had suspected him for a long time. Unexpectedly, Eric and the others have agreed to help Keith uncover Erica's murder case to catch the real culprit. Knowing that Gilbert still remembers Erica to this day, Lily offers to bait herself to him by dressing like Erica. She wears glasses and has a star-shaped birthmark on his back. Lily then met Gilbert in his office and tried to get his attention by showing his fake tattoo. Her efforts could be said to be quite successful because he seemed interested in her, who was very similar to Erica. In the evening, Lily deliberately let down her black hair and put on pink-rimmed glasses to attract Gilbert's attention, who passed her by. Lily, who argued that her car broke down, then begged Gilbert to give her a ride, and he agreed. Meanwhile, behind them, Boris and Mario quietly followed Lily and Gilbert by keeping a safe enough distance not to be suspected. She then asked Gilbert's permission to turn on the car radio so that Kayla could track his car if Boris and Mario lost track of them. Not long after, Boris and Mario saw Gilbert's car enter the car wash and chose to stay outside waiting. After that, they followed him, who turned out not to go to Lily's house but to his house. Because the house was quiet and dark, they decided to check into the house. However, what they found there were not Gilbert and Lily, but a man who looked like Gilbert and Kamui who was in a crippled state. Realizing it was a trap, Keith immediately ordered Boris and Mario to escape. However, they were too late as it turned out that the man who looked like Boris had activated a suicide bomber, blowing up the entire house instantly. Luckily, Boris and Mario managed to survive the explosion. Keith guessed that Gilbert had caught up with their plan and swapped vehicles in the car wash. However, his priority right now was to find Lily's whereabouts before Gilbert killed her. Meanwhile, Lily, previously sedated by Gilbert, finally woke up and realized that she was in the operating room naked. He apparently already knew that she had come to spy on him on Keith's orders, dressed like Erica. Therefore, he also plans to kill her to make Keith suffer more. On the other hand, Keith and Eric tried to guess where Gilbert and Lily were currently and concluded that all the forensic officers who worked on Gilbert were not ordinary people but Regis. They could be controlled by him and would obey all his orders. Keith and Eric rushed to Gilbert's office in the police forensics agency and found a secret passage behind a wall that led to the underground, where they found hundreds of bodies in glass coffins that were victims of Gilbert's murder. One of the bodies was Albert Puzo, Gilbert's father, who was murdered by him because he constantly desired to commit murder. However, Keith and Eric did not find Gilbert and Lily in that place. Keith later told Eric that Gilbert was a psychopath who killed others just like that and went back to his normal activities as if nothing had happened. He realized that Gilbert hadn't killed Lily and rushed away from there. When Gilbert called him, Keith swore that he would kill him with his own 2 hands. The desperate Gilbert then asks Leica for help but refuses to get involved in his affairs further because the market maker's real goal is to find Koku's whereabouts. The next day, Koku tries to reach the flying ship Moby Dick, which is in the sky, by flying through the clouds using his black wings. In another place, Leica, who noticed the presence of Koku, managed to reach Moby Dick, then rushed to tell Minatsuki. Meanwhile, Minatsuki, who was torturing Yuna, seemed excited when he discovered Koku's arrival. Leica, who was about to inject the gold ampule into Minatsuki, chose not to and carried out the next plan. Koku and Minatsuki then engaged in a fierce battle. In the past, the real Minatsuki, who had black hair, was seen manipulating a boy's mind and memories and making him think he was Minatsuki. The real Minatsuki, who is none other than Leica, deliberately makes other people puppets he can control to hide his true identity and act freely behind the scenes. When Koku and the fake Minatsuki were still fighting in Moby Dick, Leica rushed to take Yuna by helicopter and activated the time bomb that he had planted in Moby Dick in anticipation of an attack from Koku. Right after Koku managed to kill the fake Minatsuki, Moby Dick finally exploded in the sky. Meanwhile, Keith is seen heading somewhere by following a lead from Gilbert, which he found in Lily's mouth while rescuing her from a pile of corpses. Gilbert turns out to have been waiting for Keith's arrival in an abandoned building that holds many memories of the 2 of them with Erica, as well as the place where her mutilated body was found. Over the phone, Gilbert reveals to Keith that he was the mastermind behind the market maker attack on the Jala Blanca Research Institute, incited Minatsuki to kill Keith's father, and indoctrinated Minatsuki to kill Koku and take his place. Gilbert also revealed in front of Keith that he was the one who had killed Erica and really enjoyed the moments when he mutilated her. On the other hand, Koku managed to survive the Moby Dick explosion and was heading to the place where Yuna and Leica had been waiting for him, namely in the ruins of the jet black inscription. Since the real Minatsuki was the only Reggie who matched the Black King's eyes, Leica was isolated from all the children at the institute. Gilbert manipulated him into thinking that he was only a harvester for Koku. Leica hated Koku mainly because of what Gilbert had said about him being the king's spare part. This became the reason for his desire to break the Black Epitaph Stone and become the new Black-Winged King by exterminating Koku. Even though Keith had previously warned Koku to stay away from Jet Black because that is the only place where his regenerative skills do not work. Still, he goes to save Yuna, sensing she is in danger. Once there, Koku can no longer contain his anger when he sees Yuna in a helpless state and loses a lot of blood after Leica stabs her. He and Leica are finally involved in a fierce battle, where they are the strongest Reggie, who both have the power of the Black King's DNA. Even though Leica only has that power DNA from his eyes, he can match Koku's strength and take advantage of his inability to regenerate by shooting and stabbing him. Elsewhere, Gilbert tells Keith that he was the one who controlled Minatsuki and the market maker to turn them into killing machines, just like him. Gilbert then equates to Keith because he indirectly turned Koku into a monster after he could decipher the jet black epitaph and use the translations to complete the original black DNA sequence, which would allow Heath to revive Koku. But Keith refuses to be equated with Gilbert because they have very different principles. He says that the real monsters are not Koku and Minatsuki but Gilbert, who is bloodthirsty and always uses other people to achieve his desires. Knowing that members of the RIS investigation force had arrived at that place, Gilbert then pointed a gun at the door behind Keith while saying that he would kill the RIS member who passed through the door. Gilbert later reveals that he loves Erica very much and can stem the urge to kill her if she is by his side. However, when he discovers that Erica loves Keith, her adoptive brother, he can no longer contain his anger and kills her. On the other hand, Leica torments Koku by telling him he can join his other friends in heaven. However, he disagrees, saying all his friends are with him, inside, as he is living for him. Agitated, Leica goes to pull the knife he stabbed in Yuna, resulting in massive blood loss. Koku was furious to see her being hurt like that, putting all his strength into getting up and fighting Leica. Although Leica manages to cut his left arm, which turns into blue steel, Koku attacks him one last time and uses Izanami's sword leg to cut his head off. At the same time, Keith managed to kill Gilbert to protect Lily when she was about to enter the room. A few days later, Koku and Yuna, who have recovered, decide to live with Keith. When Lily picks up Keith with her new car so they can go to work together, he reveals to her that Erica is actually his adoptive sister and does not feel victorious by killing Gilbert, because, in fact, he had really considered Gilbert as his best friend. The moral we can learn from this anime is never to be greedy and take advantage of other people only for their own interests, because in the end, we will only suffer the consequences which will turn against us.